Welcome. This is March the 9th, 2025. I'm with Pannobhasa. He was a Buddhist monk for 30 years. Now he's a layman in North Carolina. And my question, Pannobhasa, is about simulation theory. A lot of people think that we live in a simulated reality or simulated universe. How does this compare, do you think, the idea in Buddhism we have the 31 planes of existence? So I was wondering, well, could this be like with karma? People take rebirth in the human realm, the Deva realm, the ghost realm. Could this relate to simulation theory? What do you think of that?
Well, I don't think the 31 planes of existence necessarily imply a simulation, but like the whole idea of no self certainly implies that there's some kind of illusion going on. That when in Buddhism teaches that we don't really exist, but yet we seem pretty obviously to exist, and then that would imply a kind of simulation, that samsara is a kind of simulation. And some of the Mahayana Buddhists really took that even farther, where it's like physical matter doesn't exist at all. It's all just a mind-made illusion. And the whole idea of karma, where it's like your mental states, karma is a mental state that is like conditioning the world you live in. That also implies that it's at least to some degree a mind-made simulation. Like the very first verse of the Dhammapada, it's mind is it's like mind is the forerunner. Everything is mind-made. So I mean, it's definitely a Buddhist idea going back into ancient times that we're living in a simulation, but it's not like a computer simulation. The computer simulation idea implies that at least the computer is in reality, that we're just a simulation, but the computer is in reality. Whereas from the Buddhist point of view, even if that were true, the computer would just be a higher level of simulation, that any kind of phenomenal world is going to be a simulation. It's not going to be ultimately real. It's not computer generated, it's mind generated. It's like a dream. So it's not like we're literally in some kind of computer like generated matrix. It's more like just a dream that we're living in. That would be more of a Buddhist approach to living in a simulation. So from the
Yeah,
Buddhist point of view, even if there is this big computer and we're in a matrix, the computer itself isn't ultimately real, and that itself is part of the simulation. So we would just be a simulation within a simulation in that case. But ultimately, any kind of like multiplistic, phenomenal world is going to be a simulation to some degree. It's going to be Maya or illusion.
but in simulation theory, don't they posit that this universe is a projection from another universe?
Yeah, I mean, I guess some simulation theories, like most simulation theories, have this idea that we are just like in a virtual reality inside of a computer program. But if that were the case, then that computer that we're in would also be a simulation, going with a more Buddhist point of view. So it's just kind of redundant. It's whether there's a computer or not, it's still a simulation. It's just a mind-made one rather than a computer-generated one.
So Buddhism, the ultimate reality would be nibbana, right?
Yeah,
Enlightenment.
like Nibbana Dhatu, just like the absolute that you can't really say anything about
So is a
because it's off
simulation
the
theory,
scale.
but so does the reality descend from that? Like that's the reality, and the simulation theory descends from enlightened mind, from nibbana dhatu, the 31 planes of existence.
Well, I mean, you could say in a sense that Nibbana is like the substance. It's I keep using the simile of the block of stone. You've got this big block of stone, and inside that block of stone is every possible statue. It's already in there in that block of stone. It's just that it hasn't been carved yet, but it's already in there. Every single molecule is already in the right place. So what happens is you start off with this metaphorical block of stone, and then you've got what is called dependent co-arising or paticca samuppada, where like some of the stable configurations of like statues inside the stone, they're like conditioning like other fake statues. So you've got all these fake statues kind of conditioning each other and forming like a stable pattern that seems to be real, but really it's like imaginary, even though ultimately it's kind of really there. just like the statue is kind of really already in the block of stone that hasn't been carved yet. So it's kind of virtually real or conditionally real, but it's dependent core rising or paticca samuppada that makes it seem real when really it isn't.
Okay. Because people have said they've seen cracks in the simulation theory, like little glitches and cracks in reality, which is evidence that this is just a projection, that this universe is just a
Well, it's
simulation.
the same way in a dream. I mean, like if you're in a dream and there's a book there, if you try to pick up the book and read it, your imagination isn't fast enough to imagine an entire page of print. At least in my case, it doesn't work that way. If I try to read something complicated, more than just a few words in a dream, it just doesn't work. It's like you'll just get distracted away from reading it or whatever. And so it's a simulation. It's a mind-made simulation, and it's the cracks or the gaps or whatever is just the weakness of your own imagination to like fill everything in. So just because you can see cracks or whatever doesn't mean that it's some sort of computer program. It can still just be the limitations of your own mind that is generating your own fake reality.
Oh, so you're saying in cases like that, it's a person's own mind that's generating that reality.
Yeah, and it's like that's like the theory of the paranormal that I've been going with, like the supernatural. That also comes from like our mind isn't strong enough to make a completely stable system with no cracks and no gaps and no spaces or anything. And so that's where the paranormal can leak through the order. You've got this stable pattern, but it's not perfect. There's always going to be like little cracks and gaps between the rules and so forth. And that's where the paranormal stuff gets in. That's where the supernatural stuff like leaks in to our world. And nowadays we've got science, which is a very strong way of like establishing a stable pattern for how everything works. So you've got less paranormal stuff, partly just because like scientific materialism is so strong, but still it's not perfect. And there's still going to be gaps and cracks where weird stuff that doesn't follow the rules can sneak in. And I do think that a lot of the UFO phenomena are essentially paranormal, where it's like gaps in our imagination that keeping everything stable and predictable and normal is like there's still going to be gaps that weird stuff can sneak in.
Yeah, I think so. Like trickster phenomenon. A
Yeah,
lot of UFO phenomena seems to be that way. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, from the Buddhist point of view, we are living in a simulation. It's just not a computer generated one, it's a mind made one. It's like a dream. And that's one reason why the Buddha is called the Buddha, which just means awakened. He woke up from the dream.
Okay, when you talk about this dream, if we say consider the entire solar system or the galaxy and the universe, that's not a personal dream that I'm having or that you're having. It's something, it's beyond just our own minds, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all have to have a similar enough dream that we can appear to be interacting. And there may be higher beings that are having similar dreams that are kind of helping to keep everything kind of in place. I mean, if you got some Brahma, some super high being that's dreaming a universe or kind of imagining a universe, and he thinks it's real because he's not enlightened yet. And so he's kind of helping to keep everything, all the laws of nature and stuff in order, which in a way would kind of make him like a creator god, because in a way he's kind of helping to keep the universe, kind of solid. But still, I mean, it's all an illusion. It's all like a simulation.
But in
And
Theravada cosmology, though, we do have, say, a Brahma of 10,000 full or 10,000 worlds. And I think from where Brahma's sitting, he can see all of those 10,000, I guess, solar systems or worlds. So he encompasses them all. Like we live inside of that one Brahma of 10,000 fold worlds. Isn't that the Theravada cosmological view?
yeah, although like Orthodox Theravada doesn't have Brahma like holding everything together with his mind, because Orthodox Theravada just assumes that there is a kind of external material universe,
Yeah, I
even
like
though we
that.
don't see it the way it really is, but it's still out there, kind of like science says, there really is a material universe that's not the way we see it, but it's still out there.
Yeah, like we have the James Webb Telescope now. I guess that's my Theravada school of thought, that the physical human is out there, and of course, we're not quite sure how to perceive it.
Yeah, although I mean, to some degree, there's no way of proving that some of the stuff that the Webb telescope sees existed before it saw it. It's sort of like the idea that some subatomic particles never really existed until some scientists came up with a theory for them and started saying we ought to see them, and then people start seeing them.
What about these nebulas? Like James Webb Telescope can look like 13 billion light years across the universe, right? To these nebulas. Those nebulas existed whether we saw them or not, didn't they?
Not necessarily. There's no way of proving that. I mean, it's like a dream. You can dream about nebulas. You can have, there's no reason why you couldn't have a dream about nebulas. And then it's like in the dream, the nebula's been there for billions of years. But I mean, really, the nebula only started existing as soon as you started thinking about it in the dream.
But you see, there's 3 trillion galaxies. So I'm thinking of a few galaxies on the left. If they also saw that nebula a billion years ago, doesn't that nebula exist?
Well, not necessarily. It just means that they're in a similar enough simulation to ours that they're seeing something similar to what we're seeing. Because
Yeah.
frankly, I don't believe that there is a material universe. I do agree with the first verse of the Dhammapada that it's all mind made.
Well, it could be mind made. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the idea it's mind made, but I'm just saying that it is there. Like we've posited there's like about 3 trillion galaxies now that they pretty much think they discovered.
Sort of, but although that's just all in the simulation, and in which case it's like time and space. I mean, they're not ultimately real either.
Okay, that's, I guess, I agree. I guess we're distinguishing whether we're discussing ultimate reality or conventional reality. I'm just thinking from the view of conventional reality. We seem to have 3 trillion galaxies in conventional reality, right?
Yeah, at the present time, I'm on before that we didn't have that many, and in the future we might have even more.
Yeah, I think in the
It's like
1920s they discovered that we're in a galaxy. We only had this one universe till the 1920s. Then they figured out, oh, we're actually in a galaxy, and there's other galaxies.
yeah, so everything is changing really. The whole theory is changing. And I'm open to the idea that I mean like atoms didn't exist until the first scientist, was able to come up with the idea of atoms. I guess Democritus in ancient Greece
Yeah,
had like an atomic theory, and the ancient Buddhists had sort of an atomic theory with their Rupa Kalapas and so forth. But, it's like it's you've got um like everything is in a state of quantum like randomness until a perceiving mind locks it down. It collapses it down into one like crystallized possibility. Like in quantum physics or theoretical physics, they're talking about how like an electron doesn't just go from point A to point B along one route. It goes by every single possible route, and then it's like a perceiving mind has to like perceive that then kind of locks it down to one route. So it's just sort of there's all these possibilities that are all equally real, and somehow perceiving minds just see one possibility because you just go insane. Your mind just can't dealing with more than one reality at the same time. So
yeah, I like
we
that.
just kind of
Yeah.
lock down on one possibility, and then that becomes our reality. When it may be that if a different scientist had a different theory and looked at that same thing for the first time, he might have seen it different, which then locks down a different reality.
Yeah, I like that idea that we collapse down one reality. So that nebula 13 billion light years from now that James Webb Telescope discovered, if someone in a few galaxies over on the left, if they saw it, would they have locked it down in a particular way, which would affect the way we perceive it?
Or I don't know, it's possible. Or you've got some like multi-dimensional entity called a Brahma or something that sees it and locks it down, and then that kind of stabilizes it and makes it more likely that we'll see it that way. Something along those lines. Or it could be that you got beings that are just right here with us, and we can't see them and they can't see us just because they've locked down such a different possibility, like such a different possible world, that they're just like, we're just not on the same page, so to speak. You know, it's just they're living this one version of reality. We're living in another version of reality. And we might be like right next to each other, but we just can't see each other. We can't interact because, you know, they've collapsed down a different possible world than we have. You know, they got different karma than we do.
Yeah, you've convinced that that may be true. What you're saying, that might be the way it is, the way it's collapsed down for people to perceive. That's possible, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean that's like science now. I mean, like in physics, they're saying that's the way it works. At least with regard to like really tiny like particles and so forth, like the path of an electron or something. But big things are just an accumulation of lots of really small things.
Yeah, well, I like to think that Buddhism is in harmony with science. I don't think Buddhism contradicts science so much, so that sounds reasonable.
Well, to some degree, I mean, science. I mean, it. I don't think that Buddhism and science completely agree with each other. That science does have its own ideas, and if they can't measure something or count something, then they just assume it doesn't exist. You know, like karma or something like that. Science has no use for that because they can't weigh it and measure it.
Oh yeah, like physical materialism. That's my criticism of science. It's just limited to physical materialism. Buddhism goes into other realms of existence, you know, like laws of karma. Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. The Buddhist view is more comprehensive.
Yeah, plus like early Buddhism is based on just ancient Indian beliefs that, you know, they're just not going to be in agreement with science on that score either.
Yeah. But I think our view of the universe is closer, the Buddhist view is closer to the day's view of the universe than, say, medieval Europe, you know?
Yeah, definitely it's closer to medieval Europe. And like even modern science is gradually moving towards this idea that the universe is really a projection of consciousness. But
Yeah.
Buddhists and other philosophers in India have been saying that for, you know, 2000 years at least.
So maybe science will continue to catch up with us then.
Yeah, and I do think that people who believe in the simulation idea, who think that we're all in like a computer program, are just they're conditioned by like scientific materialism, and they just can't really, you know, it's easier for them to think that we're in a computer simulation than to think something less scientific, you know, that we're just in a mind made, a mind generated simulation, like in like a dream or a hallucination.
Yeah, mind versus a computer program. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
mind is really the reality rather than a computer program.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good, good. Yeah. Anything else? I think that answers the question about simulation theory. You've had give me food for thought here.
Yeah, I would like to remark that you've got really nice decorating tastes. Like
Yeah, but I'm concerned about
your
Happy Cat.
apartment's looking really nice lately.
Yeah, well, you know, Happy Cat though, he gets on this particular couch here, you know, causes me trouble,
Yeah, yeah, you got to
scratches
use
a
the
lot.
cushions to cover up the scratches and stuff.
Yeah, scratching, but that's a cost of love having a cat, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Pannobhasa. We'll have
Yeah, you're
another
welcome.
talk. Okay.